Do you find yourself feeling a little bit drained sometimes from all the negative that goes on around you? Do you wish you could just devoid yourself of all that negative and focus on what it is that you want to achieve? Hi, this is Grant Herbert, international influencer and sustainable performance coach. And today I want to continue this building a foundation for January so that we can have a greater success in 2020 by talking about unplugging from negative. So for those of you who've been following the journey since the start of the year, you know that I would have talked about three things that we need to do. We need to unpack our bags, and we talked about that last week. So if you haven't watched that one yet, it'd be great to go back and to watch or listen to that one as well. We then talked about unplugging so that we can then move forward. And next week, we're going to talk about unlearn. But I talked about the fact that we had an issue with our power in our home last year. And what was going on was the circuit breaker kept tripping. So the positive flow of electricity that allowed me to do what I wanted to do wasn't happening. And when I went out to the circuit breaker box and I pushed the button back up, it just tripped again. And every single time I tried to reset, it tripped. So I did a little bit of Google searching as we do, and I found out that what you need to do so that you can isolate what appliance it is that's creating the problem is totally unplug it from the socket. Because when it's still connected in the socket, there's a residual power, a residual energy, a residual connection to the source. So once I unplugged everything in the house and I then went and tripped the circuit breaker back to its original position, it stayed on. And I got the electrician out and it had burned out by that stage and we had to get it all fixed. But at the end of the day, it was about isolating what was it that was causing the problem. And that's what I want to have a little bit of a chat with you about today. So when we think about unplugging, what most people think about is unplug from my social media. And that could be a good thing. But I think there's a lot more to it than that. What we're talking about is unplugging from anything that's creating negative energy and throwing negative into our environment that then stops us from being who we need to be to move forward and do what we want to do and what we need to do in 2020. We need to unplug from anything that's toxic. We need to unplug from any people that are feeding us negative time and time again. We need to unplug from any media or press. You know, right now here in Australia, there's a lot of negative press going on around things of climate change, around our bushfires, around all the wildlife that we've lost since November last year. And we're in a bit of a reprieve today. We've had some beautiful rain again today. And there's a lot of negative even talk about that because the rain can create landslides because the soil has been interrupted. There's no debris on the top of it to hold it in. We can have trees falling down, etc. And whilst that's real, it's erring on the side of negative in everything that you read, in everything that people talk about. And people take a view based on what they hear, and it can upset the equilibrium of positive in your life. And you can start feeling down. Now, I love the fact that Australia is such a giving country and we feel for those who have lost their homes. We feel for the animals that have lost their lives. We feel for the loss of the environment. And we feel for the firefighters who have tirelessly worked to keep us safe. But at the end of the day, there are several things that we need to look at, that we need to unplug from in that process so that it doesn't affect us and put us in a position where we don't move forward. In fact, I've heard a number of people who have said, and I've read a number of people's comments before I unplugged from it all, that were saying, I just feel like I feel guilty about doing anything in my business. I feel guilty about doing anything in my life while these other people are going through what they're going through. And whilst the sentiment behind that's great, that's not what's going to help us to rebuild our country. So that's enough of that before I get too political or get into things that I don't really want to talk about, that I want to unplug from. We also need to unplug from habits that we may have developed over the Christmas break that are not serving us. You know, one of the big habits for me, because I was home, was going to the fridge and getting something to eat far too often. And I'm now needing to rebuild my health and vitality where it needs to be so that I can have the energy to do what I need to do in 2020. So what is it that you need to unplug from? So when we unplug from the negative, obviously what we're doing is we're allowing room for more of the good stuff. We're allowing room for more of the positive to be in our life. And there are 3 things that I want to talk to you about in doing that. So the first thing is we need to protect our perspective. When we have an influx of negative all the time, our perspective on the world, our ability to be who we need to be, to get done what we need to do, can be damaged. And we can take a negative perspective on the overall outlook of the environment, of the world. And that's going to stop us from doing what we need to do. The second thing are our priorities. And our priorities affect our focus. So when we are off in the negative, we are listening to things that may or may not have anything to do with us and may actually take away energy and focus from our priorities. Our priorities to our own self-care, our priorities to our family, to our friends, our priorities to our business and personal goals. So perspective can be built up and kept positive by unplugging from this stuff. So the third area is our performance. The impact of positive in our life will allow us to have a greater level of performance. We'll get more done with the energy that we have, and we'll have some left over so that we can enjoy what it is we do outside of our business, out of our career and whatever. The way that we are built, the way that we are wired, negative has an effect on our brain wiring. Negative has an effect on the way that our brain works with our body, and things like the fight, flight, freeze response can be triggered by this negative. If it's linked to other things in our emotional memory, and we talk about that a lot in the emotional intelligence work that I do, but we really need to be able to set ourselves up with a positive environment so that we can perform and get what it is done that we need to get done on the planet. So what is it that you need to unplug from right now? So go ahead, before you do anything else, unplug from me and then sit down and work out. Reflect on the things that you've taken on that are negative. Reflect on the people that you've allowed to bring negative into your life. Reflect on what you've been reading, what you've been doing, the thoughts that you've been having, and what do you need to unplug from so that that source no longer has a negative power over you. So that's it from me again this week. Next week, we're going to talk about the third area, which is unlearn. I'll see you then.